Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are getting everyone who is registered into the meeting. Um, just a note for everyone, the meeting will be recorded. We have a PowerPoint that we're going to go through. My name is Grace Zuniga. I'm the Chief Programming Officer here at the Houston Arts Alliance, and today we're very excited. We'll be hearing from Quang Vu, who is our new Director of Grants, and we will also be hearing from Allison Killen, our Director of Civic Art. We're really going to be talking about these two programs, how they function at the organization, and what the different funding streams look like, and the differences and some similarities between the two. So before we get started and hand over the presentation to Allison and Quang, I just want to remind everybody to please stay muted. Chelsea is also on the call from HAA. She is our Civic Art Finance and Collection Management Specialist. She's going to be answering questions in the chat. So if you have any questions as we go through this, feel free to put your question there, and we're going to spend some time at the end of the presentation answering those questions if she can't get to them immediately, and also take questions from you all as the audience. This is our first Arts Community meeting of the year, so we're very excited you all. We also have other members of the team from both Grants and Civic Art who have joined us and are listening in as well. And so we thank everybody. I thank the team, especially Rebecca, who's our communications assistant, for helping us pull this together today. If you have any technical difficulties throughout the meeting, please send a message directly to Rebecca, who is under the Houston Arts Alliance name. But other than that, feel free to let us know who you are in the chat, your name, if you're an artist, if you're an arts organization, what media you work in. We'd love to know more about you. So we're going to get going. I'm going to turn it over to Quang. At the end of each of the presentations, we're going to have a 3-minute just kind of engagement opportunity for you all. One of the goals of HA this year is really to make sure that we're sharing the information and that it's landing and sticking with the community, and that there's a clear understanding of really how we do this work. So after each presentation, we'll spend about 3 minutes. We have a Mentimeter for you, and it really is a way for us to make sure that the information we're sharing out is clear and concise and comprehensive. So we'll appreciate your participation in that. So with that, again, any questions as we're going through this, please include in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get this, we'll get everything started. I have a lot of screens open, so just one sec. Okay. All right, can somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen okay? And otherwise, I will turn it over to Quang.
Thank you so much, Grace. Hello, everyone. I know we're cameras off, but I hope that there are smiles behind those cameras and you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. My name is Quang Vu. I'm the Director of Grants here at Houston Arts Alliance. And for this first portion, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit more about how our grants processes and grants programs work. Next slide, please. Okay, so for some folks who are, seeing this, it might be familiar to you, and you might already be familiar with our grants processes. For other folks, this might be new information, but I will speak of it from a high level and ensure that, everyone kind of gets the same information. So all of the dollars that we get for our grant programs starts with a hotel booking. So whether you are staying at the Four Seasons or an Airbnb, there is a hotel occupancy tax that is applied to those bookings. As a part of a statewide mandate, a portion of those tax dollars that are being collected are then used for arts and cultural tourism. Houston First collects those dollars and then sends them to the city of Houston. And so we work in partnership with the mayor's office of the arts once those dollars are received and sent to HAA to administer those dollars out to the community in the form of grant programs. And so there's a little pie chart in the bottom right corner. And so that breakdown that's happening, the little bright blue at the top for HAA admin is our 9% fee that we take for the work that we do to administer these grant programs. Miller Outdoor Theater takes a separate 16.5% fee, and then the remaining 74.5% is what is funding the competitive grants programs that we'll talk about in a little bit. And as we talk about those grant programs, we'll talk more about how they're funded with a cash in hand model. And then on the flip side, a model for paid on projection. Okay, so the first portion here is talking about 4 out of our 5 grant programs, which include festivals, support for artists and creative individuals, or SASSI, so you'll hear me say that, and then Cities Initiative and To Let Creativity Happen, which I will also refer to as CI and LCH. These 4 grant programs are funded by cash in hand. This cash in hand model was something that we moved to in 2021 based on a lot of community input. That community input was really around the pandemic. So we all know COVID. COVID knows us. In 2020, COVID really took out the tourism activity that we were anticipating for that year. And as a result, there were a lot of grants that were paid out based on projections that were being impacted. To ensure that our grantees have a little bit more predictability, stability, and certainty into our grant programs, we identified these 4 grant programs, which are Festival, SASSI, CI, and LCH, that could be moved into a cash in hand model. So when HAA says we are going to grant you $10,000, you will get the full $10,000 for your festival grant, and you won't see fluctuations. Next slide, please. On the flip side of that, we do have one grant program that is support for organizations, which we also refer to as SO, that is paid based on projection. Support for organizations is our largest grant program. And so because of the cash volume of the grant program, it is the one that is consistently year over year still paid out based on projection. So what does that mean? It means if there are fluctuations that we see based on tourism activity, that directly impacts the grant amount that you receive for the total grant for support for organizations. So there could be moments where it's a little bit lower or a little bit higher, but as the stewards of these grant programs, HAA will always share with you what we are aware of and what we know in real time to make sure that grantees within the Support for Organizations grant program are made aware and can plan appropriately when we are made aware of these fluctuations. The 3 grant programs within Support for Organizations are as follows. SO3, which are those are grant awards up to $1 million or 3% of a total operating expenses less in kind. In order to be eligible for Support for Organizations 3, you have to have a total operating of $10 million and above as an organization. And we also require that you complete an SMU Data Arts cultural data profile to verify this information. This is across the board for all of the 3 tiers. For support for organizations two, that is up to $125,000 or 20% of your total operating expenses less in kind. And this is for arts organizations that have been in operations for more than 2 years. And then the third one, which is SO2 at the bottom, this is up to $62,500 for arts organizations that have not been in operations for 2 years or more, or 10% of total arts programming budgets. That's specifically for non-arts organizations applying for funds to fund their arts programming at their organization. For SO1 and 2, those are strictly for organizations with $10 million operating and less. And so there's that very clear through line between support for organizations 3 and then support for organizations 1 and 2. Next slide, please. And how does it all work? Once, I hit submit on the application, what happens to my application? Where does it go? It doesn't go into, some random dark hole. It does move through a very rigorous and clear process for adjudicating these applications to then determine whether the application turns into a full-fledged grant award. So at the beginning, we have the application deadline. This is where you get to apply, talk to staff, share your ideas with us. Once the application deadline closes, we then move into what is the staff review section, where we are reviewing applications for eligibility. We're looking at completeness. We're looking at correctness of those applications based on what is written within our grant guidelines. So if you are sitting on this call, thinking about ideas for your projects, the best place to start for that is our grant guidelines. Following the completion of our eligibility verification, applications then move into what is called our peer panels review process. So members of the community apply to be a panelist to read applications that are submitted to HAA. They provide their subjective scores for those applications. HAA takes those scores and then compiles what is called a recommendation packet to move those applications forward based on the scores that panelists provided for each application in each grant program. That recommendation packet moves its way through the grants committee at Houston Arts Alliance, then the board, and then it makes its way over to the city of Houston at the mayor's desk for final approval in partnership with the mayor's office of the arts. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Before we move on, can you share with everybody where they can find the grant guidelines?
Yes, that is going to be on our website. If you go to our homepage, you hit grants, there is the grant opportunities and workshops tab. You'll want to hit that and you'll be able to see the current updated grant guidelines for our current grant cycle, which is Let Creativity Happen, and Cities Initiative Round 1. Thank you, Chelsea. Chelsea just dropped it into the chat. So if you don't have it, now you do. And then please make sure to bookmark it in case, if you are like me and you have way too many tabs open and you can't remember which is which, bookmarking will help you fix that problem.
And just to add one more thing, as Quang mentioned, everything is peer panel reviewed. The recommendation report does go to HA's committee and board. They are not voting on this recommendation packet and giving their opinion about the artists who are recommended. They're only reviewing these packets to ensure that HAA has done everything transparently and with due diligence, and that the process that we say that we are following is followed. And so I just want to be clear about that they're not voting on the artists or the arts organizations to receive these grants.
Yes, thank you, Grace. HAA facilitates the process. We do not have the ability to, like Grace shared, make determinations on the applications coming in. Okay, and if you're wondering, well, how do I also become a panelist? The link is on the screen, but we will also drop it in the chat as well. The panelist portion of our grants processes truly is the heart of this work, because it ensures that this work is for community by community. And so by having members of community apply to be a panelist, you are sitting in a room with other folks thinking about how do we create a Houston that is more culturally vibrant and artistically rich with these grant projects. So if you haven't served as a panelist yet, I hope you do. If you have already, I hope you serve with us again. Next slide, please. Okay, and then for those who are thinking about, I've got a lot of art projects this year, I don't really know, when to apply for that, for funding for these art projects or what art projects might make the most sense. I would definitely recommend kind of looking at the grant deadlines that we have available for the full year, and then assessing, when your projects will be actualized or when you're hoping to have it actualized. And then working with grant staff to apply for either round 1, round 2, or round 3 of City's initiative, or Let Creativity Happen, or we have our one big cycle for what we call annuals, which include support for artists and creative individuals, festivals, and support for organizations. And that application window will be open from June 15th to July 24th. And our launch dates and close dates are all pretty consistent. So all of these days, the applications will be available at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. And then it will close at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time as well on each of those days listed on the screen.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Quang, but for CI and LCH, because that is open right now, are there any other dates that any of the attendees can look forward to as far as information gathering or orientations or workshops?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as folks are thinking about workshops, we have released all of the workshops for Let Creativity Happen and Cities Initiative on that same link that Chelsea shared. So if you go to that, you'll not only get our grant guidelines, you'll also see right at the top what workshops are available for you. If you're, working a 9 to 5 and it's hard for you to come to the in-person one, we understand that. We have virtual workshops, and we can also have one-on-one sessions with you to talk about your application.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that fully wraps up the grants portion. So I will throw it back to Grace.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for that information. And again, if you all have any outstanding questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end. But if you think about something even after today's meeting, feel free to email. We'll put in contact information in the chat as well. Feel free to email the grants team with any meeting requests or just questions that you might have about the process. So we're going to pivot just a little bit, just a quick 3-minute Mentimeter. So on your screen, you should see, in just a sec, you should see a QR code populate. Does everybody see that? And so we have 3 short questions. So if you all could scan the QR code with your phone, we'll have the responses I need to look on the back end. They should be populating. Unfortunately, can't see them right now. But the question is, what is your understanding of where hot or hotel occupancy tax funds for grants comes from? So this is an open response. You can put that in. Again, I'm sorry I can't see the back end, or we can't see the responses. But as people are putting that in, let me work on getting those up. Let's see here. Let's see the results. Here we go. They are starting to populate. So hotel bookings in Houston, taxes from hotels, stays in Houston, comes from taxes from hotel and Airbnb bookings. That's pretty spot on, wouldn't you say, Quang? Airbnb, taxes collected by hotels and rental properties, working with mayor's office. See, anything else? Let's see, I'm gonna try local taxes levied on lodging, hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, short-term rentals collected by municipalities and counties. So yeah, heads and beds. We get people in hotels, we get a percentage, or the city gets a percentage of that, and then it is dispersed out, as Queen mentioned at the beginning, to various entities, and HA manages and facilitates the disbursement of those dollars. So great job. There's clarity in that, which is good. Good news that that's coming in that way. Okay, let's move on to the second question, which is who do you believe makes the final decisions on which artists or organizations receive HOP funded grants? Oh, so sorry. Let's see. So the options are Houston Arts Alliance staff, peer review panels, artists, community members, city officials, a combination of the above, or not sure. So if you all want to plug those in. So we have three, a combination of the above. Yeah. So as Queen mentioned, all of the grants are adjudicated by peer review panels. HA facilitates that conversation. They panels ensure that no entity is making a unilateral decision. The City of Houston doesn't decide. HA staff, board, committee members, they have no decision making in. Hank, if you could just talk about the peer review a little bit, like what that application panel process looks like, how you all select community members, that would be really helpful in this space.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to demystify the peer panels process a little bit more. Once complete applications are ready to go, we send them off to be reviewed by panelists. We go about selecting panelists really looking at a broad spectrum of demographics, from cultural representation to gender representation to professional expertise. And so ensuring that if we're putting together a panel with a large concentration of media applications, we also staff the panel with a lot of folks who have creative media expertise. And so that way, panelists are reviewing applications that are aligned with what they have submitted to us to ensure the highest fidelity within this process when we move the applications forward for recommendation to the city.
Great, thank you.
Hmm?
All right, if you have any questions about that, again, please put it in and we'll move over just to the last question regarding the grants presentation. And, the question is, after hearing from Quang, getting a little more information about the grants and grants process, how clear is Houston Arts Alliance role in this process as the facilitator versus decision maker? We're trying to just gauge to make sure that that information is correct and that, there's an understanding of how we move through this work. So very clear. There's not much confusion around that anymore. Somewhat clear. We could still do a better job at kind of deciphering out that process and our role in that process. Great. We'll give everybody just a little more time. So quiet. I do think we need music next time, Rebecca. All right. Great. Well, we thank you so much for your participation in this. It helps us just um, think about our work and make sure that we're presenting this information with clarity and find any gaps where we could be more clear. Because we really want for the community to know this information, not only for yourselves, but to be able to share this out in the community as you have colleagues or peers who are interested in this work. So we also want to provide you the information to advocate for the arts sector and access to this work. So with that, we're going to move on to the next part of our presentation or the meeting today. We're going to hear from Allison about the Civic Art program and how that all works. And a challenge for you all is just kind of find some comparisons in this work, but there are some really big differences. So I'm excited to hear from her as well.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Quang, for sharing about the great work that is going on over in our grants division. I know it's a lot, and y'all are having record-breaking years every year, so a lot of good work happening. I am excited to speak about our civic art process today and how specifically our work is funded through our contract with the City of Houston. As Grace mentioned, it is slightly different than how grants is funded. And so with that, Grace, I'll ask you to go ahead and move on to the next slide, and I'll just jump right in. So just as grants has their contract with the city for the hot funding and grants dollars, we have our contract as a service agreement with the City of Houston to complete civic art projects on their behalf and for the city civic art collection. And so those funds originate through what's called the city's capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan that's updated annually regarding upcoming improvement projects around the city, mostly infrastructure, building projects, infrastructure improvements, new additions, things like that. And so that's where those fundings originate from at the city level. Once they are approved by the sponsoring departments, the city council, 1.75% of those project budgets. So I'll use a library as an example. If a new library is set to be built in an upcoming year, 1.75% of that construction budget is designated through an ordinance that was enacted in 1999 with the city for those civic art dollars to be set aside as part of those project budgets, not in addition to, but they are used for funding, design, and construction of civic artwork. They can also apply towards other civic art services, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. The next step of the process is those funds are approved. And so once the funds have been allocated through that percentage, it goes to the Mayor's Office of the Arts, where they send HAA a letter of authorization. We work with them on developing what the project scope is, the timeline, and appropriate budget for the work, but that all is dictated to us and set with the Mayor's Office of the Arts. Those funds are authorized, and then HAA receives that letter of authorization, and we are able to commence our work, whether it's project management throughout the life cycle of a project beginning for a new commission or an acquisition, or providing other services such as collection management or a variety of other services, conservation, contracting, things like that. So the funds may be used, the civic art funds specifically may be used for the commissioning of new artwork. It can be used for new acquisitions of artwork into the city civic art collection. It can be used to conserve and maintain existing artworks or collection management and other services that pertain to the civic art program, photography and auxiliary services, things like that. Not eligible project types of that 1.75% are going to be any vertical or non-vertical projects or underground projects. So things like paving, street resurfacing, runways, ramps, anything happening underground. So digging, underground pipeline work, things like that, and projects with budgets under $500,000. Those are all projects that are not eligible. And I want to add a note that while the civic art funds are designated in response to and tied to a infrastructure project, they don't have to be used at the same location where those, if it's a library, it doesn't have to be placed at that exact library. The library can use those civic art funds anywhere within their network in order to either conserve existing artworks that they have or commission or acquire artwork where it may be appropriate, and those decisions are made by the sponsoring department and the Mayor's Office of the Arts, and then HAA is then contracted to begin that work. A big difference of our funding from grants is that, again, these are generated from construction projects through that CIP plan. They're not a hot funded revenue item. It is separate. It is a different funding source. They are tied to specific city departments. So libraries, airports, police, fire, public works, those are all separate departments within the city, and they each have their own civic art allocations, I guess you could say, that are tied to those projects. And our funding is project-based. As I mentioned, it's not cyclical. And again, they are not derived from hot tax revenue. Next slide, please. So where is the impact felt of these civic art investments? Over the past 18 months, HAA has been able to issue over $1.4 million to artists and conservators and other service vendors for civic art projects and related work. Currently, the Civic Art Collection has 873 unique objects, and there are 516 artists represented in the city's Civic Art Collection as of right now. What does that look like? So these projects include paintings, murals, prints, drawings, photographs, videos, films, stained glass, statues, sculptures, fountains, things in the parks, monuments. You see it all around you every day in various places. And we really want to drive that home, that this work is integrated into your everyday life. It's not just something that's placed in a specific area. It's really integrated all throughout the places in the city where residents and the public can enjoy. These investments of these dollars do stay local as much as possible. So this $1.4 million has been going towards artists, fabricators, engineers, photographers, conservators, installers. A lot of this work is local small businesses that are powering these projects and really making them happen. It's a team effort. There's a lot of hands that go into this work, and it's really important to highlight that. We're really proud of that, and it's really important to just like call that out, that it is a team effort. These are very local and collaborative efforts, and they are within your neighborhood. They're in libraries, airports, fire stations, and parks, not just in the city central, but all throughout the vast Houston area. So you'll see them next time you're out and about. I hope you're able to take a look and go, oh, it's the Civic Art. Next slide, please. Okay. So how are civic art projects selected? We typically go through a two-phase process, beginning first with the request for qualifications phase. That's we call it the RFQ phase, and it is an open call published to artists to please submit their qualifications for a civic art opportunity. Within this process, HAA will host 2 info sessions talking about the project, going over the submission requirements, the project details, the eligibility parameters, and any specifics about the project, any scope, any location details, things like that. And then we invite artists to submit their submissions. We use an online platform called Submittable, where all of the information is consolidated. And then we give our panelists the opportunity to review all of those submissions, and panelists convene to select 3 semifinalists from the request for qualifications phase. Those panelists are 3 arts professionals. HAA works closely with the Mayor's Office of the Arts, as well as our Civic Art Committee of our board, to identify those panelists. They're typically going to be people with an expertise in the arts, whether they are a curator or a gallerist or an artist or a conservator. It's a lot of people who have experience and can speak to and evaluate and adjudicate these submissions. HAA is not, we are just facilitating the process. And so from that panel meeting, we have 3 semifinalists who would advance to what we call the RFP phase. And the RFP is the request for proposals phase. During this phase, the 3 semifinalists will develop site-specific concept proposals. And so really looking at what does it take to bring this idea to life. We ask for a project narrative, sketches, drawings, a budget, and some more information about the project to help our panelists adjudicate these submissions to the best of their ability. Our panelists, again, pre-score these proposals, and then we have a panel meeting where we invite the 3 semifinalists to present their concept proposal to the panel, and the panel will then deliberate and make a recommendation for a finalist for selection. HIA then prepares all of the information we've received about not only the recommended finalist, but all of the information from the selection phase, and we send that information to our Civic Art Committee for a vote again on the process. As Grace clarified, it's very similar to that grants process where the HAA committee is voting on the process, and then we ask our board to look at that same information, vote on the process, and then we send all of that information to the city for their final approval and acceptance. The panel composition for the RFP phase is a little bit more robust. We'll have the 3 arts professionals from the RFQ phase, as well as 1 community representative, so someone from that community where the artwork is going to be placed in that neighborhood, in that area, and 1 sponsoring department representative from whichever sponsoring department is overseeing the project and participating in the project. And for airport projects specifically, they will also have 1 additional panelist adjudicating those submissions. And so for the RFQ phase, we generally ask for an overview that paints the picture to our panelists about you, your artistic practice, and being able to show why you're excited about this project, what you're submitting for, what your qualifications are. And so we'll ask for a resume or CV, just detailing some relevant experience, a biography that goes into some more detail about yourself, your practice, your process, a statement of intent that asks to paint a rough idea of what you would like to accomplish with this project, what your intent is with applying, and an artist statement about your overall body of work. And then we ask for up to 10 images of past works that are completed, that are relevant and applicable to the project, that really help the panelists to understand more about you, your practice, and what you've accomplished so far. Next slide, please. Okay, and so lastly, I do want to just spotlight a couple of our completed projects over the past few years. These are actually pretty recent. And so last year we completed an installation in the new Terminal E at George Bush Intercontinental Airport. So on the left, you'll see this large glass installation hanging above an entryway. This is by Marta Chillen Drone. It is a 3-part installation. This is just one of the parts for presentation purposes, 1 component, but this is by artist Marta Chillen Drone, and it is again in the IH Terminal E Departures Hall. In the middle there on the top, you'll see a artwork called Beadwork by Jim Hirschfeld and Sonia Ishii. This is in the Terminal E Departures as well. I think it's in arrivals. That's a mistype on my part, but it's in the arrivals exterior, and this is actually an example of a type of conservation project that HAA works with the city on. And so this artwork was removed from its initial location because it was affected by ongoing construction, and we were able to conserve this artwork and install it in a new home at the airport, bringing back its beauty and bringing some new life into it and into a new space at the airport. On the left, you'll see an installation of portable works, we call them, so artwork that can be moved, attached to the wall, and we have 3 framed artworks by Matthew John Baptiste, Nancy Newberry, and Wak Wen, shown here in a passenger walkway at Hobby Airport. And then lastly, on the right is a recently completed installation by muralist Killjoy at the new Montrose Library in the Montrose Collective. This is a beautiful three-dimensional, two-dimensional, three-dimensional installation. It has mural. It is some panels that have some beautiful texture to them, and it really tells the story about the history of Montrose, not just the recent history, but going all the way back to generations past. And so it's really special to be able to bring that to the community there. And I will end there. I think that's my last slide, Grace.
Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that out. Are there any opportunities, even if you don't have specific dates, like coming up in the next couple months that artists should be aware of that they could potentially apply to be part of the city's civic art collection?
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some upcoming opportunities, so I really want to encourage you all, if you are interested in submitting and being a part of the Civic Art Collection, if you're not already, to please sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to hear about new opportunities, but we do have some that we are planning to release coming up. There's been a lot of work happening in the city. I'm sure you've noticed a lot of construction, and so there's a lot of great opportunities coming up. So please definitely make sure to stay tuned in for those announcements.
Great, thank you so much. So we'll pivot and we'll go back into Mentimeter after that presentation. Again, thank you for that information. And so if you all could scan the code that comes up on your screen, these 3 questions are specifically about civic art, the civic art program and projects. And so the first one is, what do you think is the primary funding source for civic art projects? And I see that responses are hidden, so I'm going to go into the back end of Mentimeter. If you all could start answering that, I'll see if we can get these answers live. All right, 3 people are responding. The choices are city capital improvement projects or CIP projects and budgets, hot funds, hotel occupancy, private philanthropy, corporate sponsorships, or not sure. And so we have a few people responding. Let's see.
It's still showing responses as hidden for me.
Yeah,
So
I'm working on it.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. I had it set up and then it reverted back for some reason. I'm gonna click show responses. There we go. So for CIP, somebody said hot. Again, just to clarify that hot funds are specific for grant funding. So the work that Quang and the grants department does, the hot dollars fund the grants that are dispersed out. For civic art projects specifically, again, not in any kind of cycle throughout the year. These dollars come from capital improvement projects. So dollars that are allocated from the city building. As Allison mentioned, anything that is vertical. So if they're building a building, if they're doing any kind of renovation or reconstruction to an existing building, as long as the project is greater than $500,000, that 1.75% goes towards civic art to be used for either a project, conservation, or collection management as it's specific to the department who has the project. So a little bit of clarity there, but that's all right. We're still like understanding as a community like where these funds come from and how they work. So it's good to know that we have the opportunity to continue to learn about what that is. And if you have any questions about this, again, feel free to put that in the chat. We're happy to answer anything as we move along. So the second question here, I'll say show responses, is what do you, who do you believe is responsible for selecting artists for civic art projects? So we have Houston Arts Alliance, City of Houston, a selection panel, project like the construction project architects and developers, or not sure. And so we have one person who responded with selection panel, Houston Arts Alliance. Any other thoughts to that? 2, 3 for selection panel. Yeah, so very similar to grants in the adjudication process. As Allison mentioned, a panel is created for the 2 steps of selecting an artist. The first part of the process is the RFQ, or request for qualifications. That's where HA engages 3 arts professionals or 3 arts representatives who understand, scale and material depending on what the project calls for. HA facilitates those panels. So we receive all the applications, we vet it, we make sure the eligibility criteria is met, and then we facilitate those panels in the way that we hold a meeting. We bring the panelists in. We have a rubric within the selection, and HAA facilitates that panel. And so we're making sure that the panelists score, that typically the top 10 artists are discussed, and then they narrow it down to 3 semifinalists. When they move into the request for proposal stage, that panel grows. So there's 3 arts professionals or representatives. Then there's 1 city sponsoring department representative, and then there's a community representative. Usually the community representative comes from the district in which the artwork is going to go into, or somebody who works close with like a county rep or a city rep. And then for HAS, or Houston Airport Systems, we include an additional representative from that sponsoring department. Again, in that process, HA facilitates all of that. So we're making sure that they score, that conversation is moving, but that the panel in full reaches the consensus, so that we can make that recommendation to the city. And so nowhere in either of the processes does HAA have a say in selecting the artist or responsible for that. We are responsible for the facilitation though. And then our last question for the day is it clear what is needed to complete my submission for Civic Art opportunity? So curious to know if you all feel good about that. Did the information come in clear? You know what is needed moving forward? Very clear, somewhat clear. Yeah, and I'll just add, the application for a Civic Art project is pretty robust. It's like grant applications. And so we're happy to answer any questions as an organization if you're interested in applying for Civic Art projects. They're a lot different in that, the grants projects, they usually fund many people because they have a bigger allocation of dollars, where Civic Art projects, usually one artist team gets the actual opportunity. So there's a little bit of difference there, but I would say, for applying for a grant or applying for Civic Art opportunity, the request for information is pretty similar, right? We want to know who you are as an artist, where you are professionally, where, especially for Civic Art, like what artwork you've completed, so that we know that you understand sculpture, or that you understand painting, or that you understand mosaic. And so we want to see what your portfolio and how your portfolio reflects. But happy to take any meetings if you all need further clarification about what those are. I'd also just highly encourage any of the artist orientations that are provided by the team when you're interested in opportunity. That usually breaks down the information even more, and is really clear about what's needed. So thank you all for responding to that. That helps us just kind of gauge where we're at, and how we can potentially present more information. So that takes us to the end of today. We thank you for participating and joining. I want to open it up to you all. We have about 10 minutes to ask any questions, any clarifying questions about the information we received today. Before I open it up, just want to plug our newsletter. As Allison mentioned, that's the best place monthly to get information about grant deadlines, Civic Art opportunities. You can always visit our website. That information is updated there. And then follow us on social media for any posts, any information. We also share out other organizations information or like programming that might be happening in the city. So it's also a good place just to learn about what else Houston is doing. And the last thing I'll say, and just a reminder to everybody, that the City of Houston hosts an Arts and Culture Committee meeting every, I think it's every, I don't know the exact Wednesday cadence because they've changed it, but I believe it's like every last Wednesday of the month. But I could be wrong about that. It might be the first. Anyway, I believe we have the schedule posted. You can also go on and just like Google Arts and Culture Committee, City of Houston, and the schedule will come up. But that's an opportunity for you all to either go or listen in because they hosted on HTV to hear about what the arts community is doing. And a lot of times HA is presenting with more information. So I would just encourage you all to look into that. Maybe Chelsea can put a link into the chat for us or we could follow up about that. Thank you, Quang. You actually just did it. So with that, I will turn it over and open it up for any questions that you all may have with the time that we have left. And if nobody wants to talk through, we can maybe answer some questions that came in on the chat. Chelsea was monitoring that.
I'm in the room with Chelsea. There were not any questions that have not been answered in the chat. We do have one. Do these funding models apply only to the confines of the city of Houston, i.e. not Harris County? And if so, is there some equivalent organization for Harris County?
Yeah, so I think one clarity and Quang, I'll ask you to potentially expand on this a little bit. One important clarity between the $2 is that HOT is specifically for City of Houston. It's a very specific boundary. You have to live within that boundary in order to receive HOT funds. For precincts, I believe that precincts work kind of individually of each other, and so each precinct has how they dedicate hot dollars, but that's not something that HA oversees or a program that we oversee. I do want to be clear, and Quang, I don't know if you have anything to expand on that Civic Art projects or CIP projects, those dollars and opportunities expand to Greater Houston. And so all of City of Houston plus the 9 surrounding counties can apply for those funds. And so it's a little different for us internally. But I understand that counties they manage those dollars independently of City of Houston.
And Grace, when you were talking about the CIP dollars expanding to the 9 counties, you mean the eligibility requirements for artists, not the project locations?
Correct. Yeah, the CIP dollars come in from City of Houston, but artists that live in the surrounding areas are eligible. Right. Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah.
Quang, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
I think you covered it pretty clearly, just that distinction between like the source of funds versus county versus city level, and that county has its own, and it really comes down to the commissioners within those precincts.
Great. Any other questions that weren't addressed in the chat that anybody would like to ask of the team? Okay, well, just to note that this meeting is recorded. We will be putting it out on our website, and we'll follow up with any questions that come in. I believe Chelsea put on there that tonight it's from 6 to 7:30. There is an in-person workshop hosted in collaboration with Fresh Arts. So she put the link in if you all want to get more information. And the next Arts Community meeting, we'll be introducing service organizations here in Houston and learning about the work that they do and the opportunities and support that they provide for the community. So with that, we get 6 minutes back. We thank you all again, and we're here if you need anything. Thank you.